I always thought the day my son got married would be one of the happiest days of my life. I pictured myself sitting in the front row, my heart swelling with pride as he exchanged vows with the person he loved. I imagined giving a toast, maybe tearing up a little, and watching him dance with his new spouse while everyone clapped. That's what fathers dream about, right? But reality has a cruel sense of humor. My name is Robert Calder, and I'm 62 years old. I spent my entire life as a corporate attorney in Denver, Colorado. For 35 years, I worked long hours, fought in boardrooms, and handled more stress than most men could endure. I didn't do it for the money or the prestige. I did it for my family, especially my only son, Liam. His mother passed away when he was 8. From that day forward, he became my reason for everything. I wasn't a perfect dad. I missed a few soccer games. Sometimes I was too tired to help with homework. But Liam never doubted I loved him. At least, I thought he didn't. The call that changed everything came on a quiet Sunday evening. I was sitting in my study, sipping chamomile tea and reading the paper. It was February, snow falling lightly outside. My phone buzzed. Liam's name appeared on the screen. I answered with a smile. "Dad, I've got news." His voice practically exploded through the speaker. "I'm engaged." At first, I thought I misheard him. Liam had dated here and there, but never seriously. He was 28, ambitious, and worked as a software developer in Seattle. He'd always said marriage was years away. "Engaged?" I asked, my heart doing a strange flip. "That's fast. Who's the lucky person?" He spun the camera around, and there he was, Ethan Holt. Tall, sharp-featured, with perfect black hair and a smile that looked more rehearsed than genuine. "Mr. Calder, it's an honor to meet you," Ethan said smoothly. "I promise I'll take care of Liam." Something about his voice prickled my instincts. Maybe it was the way he said take care like Liam was property. Or maybe it was the expensive Seattle apartment in the background, way too nice for what Liam earned. They told me about the wedding. It would be in Portland. A beautiful venue called Riverside Hall. May 10th, barely 2 months away. Ethan explained how he'd found a cancellation at the last minute and booked it. "When you know, Ethan said with that billboard smile. I tried to be supportive, but my gut screamed something was off. I didn't want to ruin Liam's happiness, so I stayed quiet. But deep down, I knew this wasn't love. It was something else. A few weeks later, Ethan called me directly. Said he wanted to meet man to man. I agreed. We met at a high-end bistro downtown. He wore a tailored charcoal suit and an expensive watch. He ordered a $30 cocktail without blinking. "Mr. Calder," he said, leaning in. "I need a favor. This stays between us." My stomach tightened. "What kind of favor?" He sighed dramatically, like he was carrying the weight of the world. "My funds are temporarily tied up due to a compliance review. Bureaucratic nonsense. But Liam's dream wedding? It needs to be paid up front. $45,000 will cover everything. I'll pay you back with interest before the year ends." I stared at him. 45,000. Almost my entire savings. Does Liam know about this? Ethan shook his head. No. And it's better he doesn't. He'd just worry. Against my better judgment, I agreed. For Liam's sake. I wrote the check. Ethan grinned, thanked me, and promised no one would ever know. But the unease never left. That night, I couldn't sleep. Something about Ethan didn't add up. Over the next weeks, I dug into his background. I had connections in law, people who could find things the average person couldn't. What I found made my blood run cold. Civil lawsuits. Fraud allegations. Different last names. Victims from Los Angeles, Phoenix, Dallas. A pattern emerged. Ethan would woo someone, propose fast, drain them or their families financially, then vanish. I confronted Liam with the evidence, pleading with him to look. But Ethan had already poisoned his mind against me. He convinced Liam I was jealous, controlling. He said I couldn't handle my son growing up. The wedding day came. I still held out hope my son would see the truth. But when I arrived, my heart shattered. At the entrance stood a framed photo of me with the words "Do not enter" at the couple's request. Guests looked away, embarrassed. I set my gift, a pair of sapphire cufflinks, on the floor, turned, and walked out. No words. No scene. Just pain. But I wasn't done. If Ethan wanted to play games, he picked the wrong father. That was the moment my revenge began. The drive back from the wedding was one of the longest of my life. The Oregon rain pelted the windshield as if mocking me. My son had chosen a con artist over me, and I had been publicly humiliated in front of people I had known for years. Each mile I drove back to Denver, the pain inside me hardened into something else, resolve. I spent the first few days afterward in a haze. The house felt emptier than ever. Every corner held a memory of Liam growing up, his baseball glove on a shelf, his school photos lining the hallway, the Lego spaceship we built together still sitting in my study. For the first time since his mother passed, I wondered if I had truly failed as a father. But I wasn't going to let Ethan destroy Liam's future. And I wasn't going to let him get away with what he did to me. I started by calling an old friend, Daniel Suarez, a retired private investigator I'd worked with on corporate cases years ago. Daniel owed me a favor, and when I explained what happened, he didn't hesitate. "Send me everything you have," he said. "Names, dates, anything. I'll start digging tonight." While Daniel went to work, I started my own research. Ethan Holt wasn't even Ethan Holt. His real name was Ryan Keller. He had used at least 5 aliases over the last decade, each tied to similar scams. He'd meet someone vulnerable, usually someone young, with a supportive family and a decent income, then sweep them off their feet. His relationships never lasted longer than a year, but his thefts left scars for life. I compiled everything into a file: copies of lawsuits, complaints filed in other states, bank accounts tied to shell companies. I wanted a complete picture before I made my move. Daniel called back 3 days later. "You were right. He's a pro. And he's not just after Liam. He's in debt to some very dangerous people." That caught my attention. "What kind of people?" "Loan sharks. Organized crime in Vegas. He's been running scams to pay them off. They don't know where he is right now, but if they find him first, it won't be pretty." A part of me wanted to let those people handle Ethan. But that wouldn't help Liam. My son was still blind to who Ethan really was. If I didn't act, Liam would lose everything: his savings, his credit, maybe even his career. I needed a plan. The first step was patience. I didn't contact Liam or Ethan. I didn't let on that I knew anything more. I went about my days as if nothing had happened. But at night, I mapped out Ethan's life like a military operation. He worked remotely, so there was no office to show up at. But Daniel found out Ethan liked to frequent an upscale social club in Portland called the Glass House. It catered to tech entrepreneurs, venture capitalists, and wannabe elites. Ethan fit right in with his fake charm and designer suits. Daniel and I paid the club a visit one evening. We sat at the bar, blending in, while Ethan held court at a table with 2 other men and a woman. He laughed too loudly, gesturing with a whiskey glass, acting like he owned the place. "He's working them," Daniel muttered. "Probably his next targets." Watching Ethan made my blood boil, but I stayed calm. My revenge wouldn't be loud. It wouldn't involve screaming or scenes. No, it would be clean, precise, and devastating. Over the next few weeks, Daniel and I followed Ethan's digital footprint. We traced the fake companies he used to move money, the burner phones he registered, the accounts where he stashed stolen funds. It was a tangled web, but we unraveled it piece by piece. Then I made a few discreet calls to contacts I still had in corporate law enforcement. I didn't tell them everything yet, just enough to plant seeds. When the time came, those seeds would grow into a storm that Ethan couldn't escape. But there was one more thing I needed: leverage over Liam. My son didn't trust me anymore. Ethan had made sure of that. If I confronted Liam with the truth too early, Ethan would twist it again. So I decided to wait until the evidence was overwhelming. One night, around midnight, I got an email from Daniel. Attached were screenshots of Ethan's encrypted messages. He had been bragging to someone about how the old man paid for the wedding like a sucker. He also admitted he planned to drain Liam's accounts and disappear by Christmas. I stared at those words for a long time. That was my breaking point. The next morning, I called my bank and froze the account I had used for the wedding payment. I couldn't recover all of it, but I could make sure Ethan didn't get the rest. Then I contacted my law enforcement friends again and sent them the full file on Ethan, every crime, every alias, every shell company. But my revenge wasn't just about turning him over to the law. That would be too simple. Ethan needed to lose everything the way he made others lose everything. And I had just the plan. Daniel and I started leaking Ethan's information anonymously. First to his so-called business partners at the glass house, then to the loan sharks he owed money to. Rumors spread fast, and Ethan's perfect little world began to crack. Within a week, his partners cut ties. 2 of the shark's enforcers showed up at the glass house looking for him. Ethan fled to Seattle with Liam, but I already knew where they were going. I wasn't going to confront them yet. Not until the trap was fully set. On a rainy evening in late October, I stood outside Liam's apartment building. I didn't go in. I just watched from my car as my son walked inside, holding Ethan's hand. He looked tired, thinner than before. Ethan was still smiling that fake smile, but I could see the cracks. They didn't know it yet, but their lives were about to implode. And I was the one holding the detonator. The first real fracture in Ethan's carefully crafted world appeared a week after I sent the files to my contacts and Daniel started leaking information. At first, it was just whispers among his so-called business friends at the glass house. By now, Daniel and I had fed them proof that Ethan, or rather Ryan Keller, wasn't who he claimed to be. We sent records of his fake companies, lawsuits under old aliases, and copies of angry letters from people he'd conned. The Portland elite were ruthless in their own way. They thrived on reputation. Ethan had built an image of a charismatic entrepreneur. But when the rumors spread, invitations dried up. He was no longer welcome at dinners and investor meetups. Suddenly, he wasn't the golden boy anymore. He was a liability. Daniel sent me a photo one evening, Ethan sitting alone at the glasshouse bar, his usual confident grin replaced by a tight jaw and restless eyes. A few days later, we heard from a mutual contact that his so-called partners had pulled their funding from his latest scheme. But that was just the beginning. The next part of my plan targeted his finances. Ethan had several shell accounts, empty fronts for moving stolen money. Thanks to Daniel's digging, we identified where most of his assets were hidden. Then, through my contacts in corporate crime enforcement, those accounts were quietly flagged for investigation. Within a matter of days, they were frozen. That was when Ethan began to panic. I could tell because Liam called me out of the blue. "Dad?" His voice trembled slightly, and I could hear the strain. I need to ask you something." "What is it, son?" "Ethan's having some business trouble. He says some of his partners are jealous and trying to ruin him." "Have you heard anything?" I forced my tone to stay neutral. "Business trouble happens. But if people are walking away from him, there's probably a reason." Liam went quiet. You don't like him, I get that. But he loves me. He wouldn't hurt me. I wanted to scream that he was wrong, that Ethan was bleeding him dry, but I swallowed it. Timing mattered. Instead, I said calmly, I hope you're right. Just protect yourself. Keep your finances separate. Don't give him access to your accounts. A silence stretched between us before Liam muttered, we already share an account. I closed my eyes. Ethan had already gotten to him financially. I felt the fury rising, but I kept my voice even. Then be careful. Very careful. When we hung up, my resolve hardened. Ethan wasn't just a scammer, he was a parasite. And he was draining my son dry. Daniel called me that night with news that made me smile for the first time in weeks. You're not going to believe this, he said. Ethan's loan shark friends know where he is now. And they're furious. Apparently, the loan sharks had shown up at his building. They didn't hurt him, yet, but they made it very clear that if he didn't pay up soon, things would get ugly. Ethan was now juggling collapsing scams, angry lenders, and frozen accounts. But I wasn't done. The final blow needed to come from someone Ethan trusted most. And that someone turned out to be Claire Donovan, the same woman who caught the bouquet at the wedding. Daniel's digging revealed that Claire wasn't just a guest, she had a history with Ethan. They'd run scams together years ago, but he'd cut her out of a big payout. Claire had been waiting for a chance to get even. When Daniel and I approached her with our evidence, she didn't hesitate. You bring me the proof, she said, her voice dripping with contempt, and I'll take him down myself. We gave her everything. Screenshots of Ethan's texts bragging about conning Liam, his fake companies, and his messages to other potential victims. Claire reached out to him under the guise of helping him get new investors. She even convinced him to meet her in Seattle. I wasn't there for the meeting, but Daniel followed from a distance. Later, he told me how it went. Ethan arrived all smiles, expecting Claire to hand him a lifeline. Instead, she pulled out a tablet and showed him every piece of evidence we gathered. She told him she'd already forwarded it to the police, the loan sharks, and the people he'd conned before. Daniel snapped a photo of Ethan's face at that moment. The smirk was gone. His confidence shattered. He stormed out of the cafe, calling Liam frantically. My phone rang an hour later. It was my son. Dad, Liam's voice cracked. Ethan, he's gone. He packed up and left. Said he needed space. And his voice broke. The account's empty. My savings are gone. I clenched my fist. It hurt hearing my son in pain, but it was necessary. He had to see the truth. Come home, Liam, I said softly. We'll fix this together. When I hung up, Daniel looked at me. You're almost there, Robert. One more push, and he's finished. But I knew this wasn't over yet. Ethan was cornered, but cornered animals are dangerous. And as the autumn rain lashed against my windows that night, I knew he would come back, not for Liam, but to save himself. When he did, I'd be ready. 3 days after Liam called me in tears, I woke up to the sound of my doorbell at dawn. The rain hadn't stopped all night, the Portland sky hung low and heavy, and the gray light spilling through my window made everything feel cold. When I opened the door, Ethan was standing there. His once polished appearance was a mess. His tailored jacket was soaked, his shirt wrinkled, and the charm that had always oozed out of him like perfume was gone. His eyes darted around like a cornered rat. Robert, we need to talk, he said, voice cracking slightly. I didn't flinch. I can't imagine what we have to talk about. He stepped inside without waiting for permission. You did this, he hissed. The accounts, the loan sharks, Claire, none of that happened until you got involved. I folded my arms and stood quietly, letting the silence hang. It unnerved him. You don't understand, he continued, his tone desperate now. "They're going to kill me. I need money, fast. Liam's broke, and if you care about your son, you'll help me." For a moment, I just looked at him. Here was the man who had conned my son out of his life savings, who had manipulated him into believing their love story was real, who had charmed his way into every corner of Liam's world like a virus. And now he wanted my help. I almost laughed. "You've mistaken my silence for weakness, Ethan," I said quietly. "That was your first mistake." He froze. Something in my voice must have told him I wasn't bluffing. "What do you want from me?" he whispered. "You want me gone? Fine. But you have to get these people off my back. You don't want blood on your hands." "You'll handle them yourself," I replied calmly. "You always said you were smart. Let's see how clever you really are when the lies are gone." He started pacing. "You don't get it. They'll find me wherever I go. I need a way out, a clean slate." That's when I slid the folder across my table. He stopped pacing and stared at it. Inside were printed copies of every scam he'd run, every alias, every debt. But at the very top was the document that broke him, the official notice that federal authorities had frozen his remaining assets and issued a warrant for his arrest. Daniel's contacts had come through quicker than I expected. Ethan's lips trembled as he flipped through the papers. You called the feds?" "No," I said calmly. "I just gave them a gift-wrapped truth. Everything in there is yours. You built this house of cards. I just gave it a little breeze." He sank into my chair like a man who had just been shot. For a moment, I saw the real Ethan, not the confident scammer or the charming con man, but a coward. A man who'd never built anything real in his life. "Please," he whispered. "I'll disappear. I'll never bother Liam again. Just call them off." "There's nothing to call off," I replied. "You can run if you want, but they'll find you. And when they do, it won't be because of me. It'll be because of what you've done." Ethan's head dropped into his hands. He stayed like that for a while, the rain pounding outside like a drumbeat. Finally, without another word, he stood and walked out my door. I didn't follow. I didn't need to. 2 weeks later, Liam came home. He looked thinner, paler, and older, but his eyes were clearer. He stood in my living room, hands shoved into his jacket pockets, and for the first time since he'd met Ethan, he looked like my son again. "He's gone," Liam said softly. "No calls. No texts. I don't even know where he went." I nodded. "And your money?" "Gone. But I don't care anymore." He swallowed hard. "You were right about him. About everything. I just wish I'd listened sooner." I walked over and put my hand on his shoulder. Sometimes we have to lose the wrong people to make room for the right ones. For the first time in months, Liam smiled. It was faint, but it was there. "Thank you, Dad. For not giving up on me." We didn't talk about Ethan after that. We didn't need to. Months later, Daniel sent me a short news article from across the country. It mentioned a man named Ryan Keller, Ethan's real name, arrested in Florida for wire fraud and identity theft. He tried one last con, but the feds were waiting. He'd face decades behind bars. I stared at the headline for a long while, then closed my phone. There was no satisfaction, no gloating, no victory dance. Just quiet closure. Ethan had destroyed himself. All I'd done was nudge the truth into the light. That night, Liam and I sat on the porch watching the sunset. The world felt still again. He didn't ask how Ethan fell. He didn't need to know. And I didn't need to explain. Sometimes revenge isn't about yelling or fighting. It's about patience. It's about making sure the right people fall on their own sword. And when they do, you don't need to raise your voice. You just watch them disappear. Have you ever been underestimated or betrayed? What would you have done in my place? Share your thoughts below. I read every comment. And if you love the way justice played out, hit that like button and subscribe for more jaw-dropping real-life revenge stories.